Today, the Lemba are mainly concentrated in the shadow of the Soutpansberg Mountains in the far north of South Africa. To the casual observer, they look and live much like any other traditional Southern African community. But if you scratch below the surface, there are some intriguing differences.
Here I am in South Africa, and there are these men wearing skull caps and talit, shoulder wraps. You would see this in any synagogue in America or Israel, but I never thought I'd see it here in South Africa.
I want to find out how these people seem to have Jewish customs. Samuel Moeti is president of the Lemba Cultural Association.
Pleasure.
So, I'll be honest, I came into this village and the first word I heard was shalom,
Yes.
a Hebrew word.
Yes.
How's that possible? How is it that the Lemba are speaking Hebrew?
The Lembas are the original Hebrews, and they were scattered, as you know, and they crossed into Africa. So they were scattered all over. So in South Africa, in many parts of South Africa, you find the Lembas who are actually Hebrews.
Hebrew. So the Lembas claim to be descendants of ancient Israelites?
Not claim, they are.
They are?
They are.
Okay.
The Lemba story goes like this. Thousands of years ago, they were forced out of Israel and settled in a place called Senna, which is believed to be the present-day Yemen. There, they lived as traders and craftsmen until war or natural disaster pushed them across the Red Sea and into Africa. Then began a slow migration south. Along the way, according to the Lemba, they built great stone cities. It's a claim that's fascinated archaeologists. Why? Because the ruins of ancient stone cities still exist in southern Africa today. It's also where I need to be exploring next.
I had no idea how big this site was.
This once thriving settlement is now easy to miss, so we've asked one of the farm workers to take us to the site. Waiting for us at the top is archaeologist Richard Wade. He believes he's found some material evidence which links this site with both Yemen and Zimbabwe, two of the places the Lemba say they traveled through.
Come and have a look at these amazing things here. There's a potter's weaving weight.
A potter's weaving weight?
Saw this thing. It's the form of a spinning jenny, and this, of course, is found in Yemen. But basically this, apart from that, look what else. This is an amazing, I would say, not decoration, but inscription. I've seen this before. You make out some sort of a letter, followed by a dot, followed by another letter, followed by another sort of a letter, and a dot, and another letter. Or is it just decoration?
Yeah.
But the problem is we find this in Yemen.
This?
No.
You just found this, correct?
Yeah, it was lying.
It was just sitting here?
Yeah, there's another
and this,
potsherds here.
This tells you what?
Well, this is a weaver. There was weaving done here. There was cotton grown. There was something with the trade. And the only people who do that are basically mentioned by the oral traditions of the Basena people or the Lemba.
So this says the Lemba were not just living here. They were actually, they had a big enough community that they were weaving.
Yes, this is like a castle with almost a little kingdom, possibly.
Richard believes the Lemba of Machima shared more than ancient technologies with the Israelites of Yemen. They shared the same culture.
The inscription that's written into that wall is significant because it ties this place with other Lemba communities?
I would say so.
Okay. Cylindrical tower.
It seems both experts are convinced this place is definitely the work of ancient Lemba communities.
The question that I'm wondering is that this is a significant amount of work. Is there anything physically, archaeologically, that was found here that connects the Lemba with other places that they claim to have traveled through?
Yes, there are amazing collections of beads which are found here and are found in Zimbabwe, but it's a specific collection of beads. I'm not talking just about one or two of them. And these beads are directly related to Tarim and Sayut, where the harbors are of the Sena people, originally coming through from Yemen. But nowhere else, nowhere else.
So these beads, just take a look at them real quick, reinforce the Lemba's claim
Very much.
that they did indeed travel from Israel into Yemen and then south through Africa. This is actually the first physical proof I've gotten of the people here coming from someplace to the north. And the Lemba today claim this as their heritage.
then it is.
The most intriguing feature at the Machima site is the remains of a mysterious conical tower, which still has archaeologists scratching their heads.
But I'm not really clear what it was used for.
Nobody really could tell you unless they lived there. But is it a lookout tower? No, it's too low for the rest. You would have your lookout tower higher there. So we have a very significant, well-made little conical tower, which is very much the only one I've ever seen south of Zimbabwe.
Really?
Oh, yes. Zimbabwe's Great Enclosure has got the large one. There's quite a few there. There's a small one, but this is not seen in South Africa.
A Zimbabwe connection is interesting because that's one of the places the Lemba say they traveled through.
And these are the Lemba.
Then this was built by the same people who built the one in Zimbabwe?
Definitely the same people. The same stonework is here, the same bead types, the same weaving technology.
Richard lays out some convincing evidence that the Lemba did indeed build this place, and could also have built the largest ancient stone city in sub-Saharan Africa. The scientists here at the National Health Laboratory Services have screened the genetic profiles of the Lemba and their neighboring tribes, the Venda and the Bantu. They've come up with some revealing conclusions.
There's a non-African contribution to the gene pool of the Lemba, which is not evident in the peoples amongst whom they live in that part of the world. The Lemba...
Dr. Jenkins believes DNA always trumps appearances, and the Lemba's claim to Jewish ancestry may indeed have some genetic support. Not only is their DNA very different from their neighbors, but according to his colleague, Dr. Himla Sudyal, it may have a non-African, even Jewish connection.
I'm Josh.
Himla tells me that the presence of the Kohen modal haplotype can't tell us anything about the Lemba's religion. Yet just as remarkably, it can tell us where their ancestors came from, and it's not in Africa.
There is this interesting genetic information showing us that some of the original founders did come from other parts of the world, other than Africa. From our data, I would put my money on saying it's the Middle East.
By the mid-1990s, I'd become convinced that the Lemba claim that they were of Jewish origin could be true. They'd preserved so many Jewish traditions for so long. But final proof only came when the science of genetics was applied to Lemba oral history, and geneticist Trevor Jenkins decided to examine the Y chromosome of Lemba males. His interest had been sparked by what he'd heard about Lemba culture.
The musicologist, Margaret Nabarro, told me the Lemba were of Jewish origin.
I think she said that their music showed some signs of Jewish influence.
Yes, she did. And so I went with her to a Lemba cultural festival and collected my samples there.
Astonishingly, Jenkins discovered that the Lemba were indeed of Semitic origin. Subsequent research done by other geneticists showed that a significant proportion of Lemba men had a Y chromosome pattern known as the Cohen modal haplotype, which is characteristic of the Kohanim, the ancient Jewish priestly class.
I knew from the DNA research that some of the men who left the Yemen for Africa were ancestors of the Buba clan. These men had a Y chromosome pattern characteristic of the Kohanim, the ancient Jewish priestly class. They were among the forefathers of today's Lemba. I was interested to know whether genetic research could tell me anything about how many men had been in that founding group.
When we were looking at the male contribution to the gene pool of the Lemba, we came down to a small number, something like 8 or 9 men who could be thought of as having come to that group and left their Y chromosomes.
That is pretty remarkable, because there is a Lemba tradition.
Yes.
That the original number was about 14 or 15 in a boat, and the boat split into 2.
Yes.
And 7 of them came south towards southern Africa. Yes. So it's completely kind of consistent. Yes. with your findings.
Yes.
2,500 years ago, the Ark of the Covenant, perhaps the holiest object on the face of the earth, vanished without trace. Lemba oral traditions say that a small group of men, some of them members of the priestly Buba clan, left Jerusalem at the time of the Babylonian invasion, settled in Senna, and later came to Africa, carrying with them a sacred object called Ngoma Lungundu.
So what exactly is this Ngoma Lungundu?
It means a drum that thunders. It was perceived as the voice of their god. It was carried by the Lemba people. It was not supposed to touch the ground. It was not supposed to be touched improperly by other people. And it played a tremendous role in their history. It was actually used during war. And it had an effect on the enemy. It rendered them powerless.
At some time in the past, Ngoma was lost to the Lemba. But then, 60 years ago, it was found, damaged by fire, in a cave alongside the Limpopo on the border between Zimbabwe and South Africa by a German missionary called Harold von Sickard. And it seemed I was not alone in believing there was a strong connection between the Ngoma and the Ark.
Early missionaries like von Sickard examined the parallels between the Ngoma Lungundu and the Ark of the Covenant. In his book it's called an Afrikanische Bundeslade. It means it's an African Ark of the Covenant.
Absolutely fascinating.
You can see the different holes there and the handle.
And that looks like the remains of a handle here.
Exactly. It was where the pole went through when they carried the Ngoma Lungundu. And even in Lemba tradition, I think it's so obvious to them that they don't really say, but this is the Ark of the Covenant, but it's so similar. It functioned as such.
Was the Ngoma one of the things that you heard about when you were a kid?
We have been told that the Ngoma it was having power. It was used like a weapon, especially when they move throughout. And then it is very important to us, and as something which makes to differentiate the Lemba with some other cultures, that it was held by the Lemba only.
What the Ark was doing, this Ngoma was doing.
Yeah.
You see, protecting the people, making them victorious wherever they went. The armies were always invincible. Then I don't have any doubt they have a connection.
So do you think that they were the same thing?
I do think so.
I've traced Jewish traditions and genetic links from ancient Jerusalem through Arabia and the Yemen to the Lemba tribe of southern Africa. Was there any evidence that the ancestors of the Lemba had brought their sacred drum and the Ngoma Lungundu with them from the Yemen? Magda Leroux's search amongst the writings of early Muslim historians furnished a clue.
In 1150, an early Arab historian, Idrishi, refers to the possessors of the Ngoma Lungundu. And he said they were closely associated with the people who carried the drum, the Lemba. And that was 1150 at the east coast of Africa.
The East African coast was exactly the place I would have expected the Lemba to have been 9 centuries ago if they'd recently left the Yemen. And perhaps Idrisi saw them carrying their most sacred object with them. I was convinced that the object they brought was the Ark of the Covenant.
We've seen how science has backed up the claims of the Lemba in the face of years of doubt and prejudice. The archaeological clues, the DNA evidence, and the Lemba's own oral history add up to a very convincing argument. It was hard to believe that a tribe of black Africans could be the descendants of ancient Israelites. But that's exactly what they appear to be.
Brothers and sisters, they are there. We are not lost. We are scattered. We are original Hebrew.